Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It. I'm your podcast host, Robert Davis. Appreciate you all for tuning in to another episode. Before we get into this week, follow me on social media. Instagram is RTD underscore III. Um, Facebook, Robert Trey Davis the third. Um, like, comment, subscribe, follow the podcast. Is currently on four different platforms: Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and on YouTube. It should be under the same name. Maybe I'm just not getting the podcast. Should be relatively easy to find. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. I appreciate everybody's consistent um, support, feedback, um, you know, uh, willingness to serve as guests and wanting to express topics and thoughts and everything like that. It um, really helps kind of keep the show going. So I appreciate you all as we continue on with the third season. So in today's episode, this will probably be one of my shorter episodes because this is kind of another rant, but I don't have as much to really talk about in this one, or I think it's pretty self-evident. I think it would just be beating around the bush to talk about it overly a lot. But I want to talk about individualism, or at least in my mind, what's the lack thereof in today's society. And when I talk about individualism, what I mean is individualism. Sorry, I have a hard time saying that word because of my accent. So this may be a little bit of a train wreck in that regard. But it's defined by all of us having our own unique essence or kind of individual personality. And is I think because all people are like snowflakes. No two are the same. We all have different experiences, different memories, different upbringings, different likes, quirks, all that shape who we are in every single way of form. And I think individualism, as a sense, has become lost in our current culture because we favor trends and popular culture and popular things more than I think we have in the past. And I don't know if I should say we favor it more than we have in the past. I think more people favor it. I think there's always been those that follow kind of like the trends and the popular themes and stuff like that. But you've always had those that also kind of was like, all right, I'm sticking to my own path or my own beat and kind of the things I want to do. And I think we've had less of that now for multiple reasons I'm going to kind of get into the show. But I think we've had less of people being comfortable being themselves, being comfortable. And when I talk about individualism, I'm not talking about being different. I'm talking about being yourself. There's a difference between those two. Being different for the sake of just being different is being a follower as well. You're just following a different path. But being yourself, you may, your style, your opinions, your stuff may be similar to somebody else. But if it's what you genuinely believe, is what you genuinely stand on, is what you genuinely present, then that's being yourself. And that is what makes us all unique, and that's what makes us all genuine. And I think we have lost some of that in our current culture. Like people say call it like being fake. I don't think it's as much being fake as that people are emulating what they seem to be successful, or what they seem to be popular, or what they seem to be cool, more now than I think what we've ever done in the past. And that's across like all avenues of life. I think is where it's coming from and why I want to talk about it. It's not just like, oh, personality. It's like everything now. It's like copy, cut, paste or something else. And like to a degree, like again, there's always been followers and trends, but this the increased lack of kind of like that creative individual side of society is, I think, I don't think it's new, but the increase in it is more prevalent, like I said, than it's ever been before. And like, I remember the quote that normal is overrated. Don't And I think popular is overrated too. I mean, I think being yourself is where it's at. And as far as individual human beings with our own individual essence, our own individual personalities, our own individual things that we value, that we see, that we want to be, that we want to do, we have to stay in that realm of we have to stay in that realm of trying to be genuine and trying to be real to who we are and not just copying, whatever we see in front of us, or, whatever we see that people tell us to do or tell us to be, because we think, oh, that's what they want to see, or that's what will get us where we want to be. Because, ultimately that won't lead to anybody's happiness. That won't lead to anybody's fulfillment or enjoyment of life. And I think ultimately that's what we have to work towards. And like, just as a quote, if I think for this, both of my parents were big on instilling that lesson of being yourself into me, because like my father would tell me every day to be a leader and not a follower. And I think that's the first. I don't think it's the first part of it, but I think that's one big lesson of it. And my mother always emphasized being your own person over somebody else's. And I think when you take those two lessons with you, then you will always walk in your own path, and you will always represent yourself, and you will always speak for yourself and not, for other people or what other things are presented to you. And so I think, why this matters per se is that I think the best ideas, obviously, the best ideas in our culture, whether we talk about, or in our history, not just our culture, in our history, whether we talk about from Albert Einstein to Thomas Edison to George Washington Carver to Elon Musk to Charles Drew to anybody, quite frankly, is the fact that they had their own individual thoughts, and they had to think, they had to put themselves and their own ideas and their own self out there, and be creative and be individualistic and challenge the norm. And those diverse trains of thought, those different experiences, those perspectives, when they talk about diversity, bringing, a lot to the table, because we all have different perspectives that we can learn from. All of that matters. Like it does. And it creates, different ways of thinking, different perspectives, different understandings, different levels of empathy that we all can learn from. And you know, if we don't value that, or if we don't, try to cultivate our minds by thinking outside the box, by challenging what's in front of us, by asking questions, by, just going that extra step, then we lose ultimately some of our greatest creations, some of our greatest technological advancements, some of our greatest um, inventions, and some of our greatest ideas are, culturally, our music, our art. All of these are examples of people in the world expressing itself through an individual lens that could not just be cookie cutter cut, into something else. And we get that imitation is a form of flattery, but at a certain point, it does go too far. Like there's a distinct line in my honest opinion between like inspiration and mimicry, or being a fan and being an imitator. And like I think taking inspiration from something, being a fan of something, paying homage to something, that's natural. That's within the human condition to do. I think I think mimicry and imitation comes from a lack of creativity. It comes from a lack of desire to be different, and it comes from a fear of being criticized for expressing yourself in a way that may not be seen as, oh, that's what I would do, or what somebody else would do. And I think that when we get into those ideas of imitation and mimicry, th- that's where we take it too far. Like, for example, and I'm not an example part yet, but for example, there's a quarterback for the University of Nebraska. I forget the young man's name, Raiola or something like that. He has completely imitated everything about Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, style. down to his look, his mannerisms, the gear that he wears, his style of play. I think that's weird. And it's weird that people not accept it because you can't tell them not to do it. But it's weird that people don't be like every time, like, bro, that's weird as hell. Like, and because it's one thing to be a fan, like, there was when Allen Iverson was hot, there was white kids with cornrows and the tattoo on their necks and like getting the fake tattoos on their necks and headbands and stuff. Yeah, yeah, that's taking inspiration. It is a similar sort of fanhood, but that I think when it becomes so popular, like even with the podcast, who was the podcaster, but the guy what was his name, Smirkio, the fake Dirk. Like there's a lot of that where people are famous for imitating other people. Like that is so weird to me, and I think it's we've gotten into this line of that being popular or that being acceptable, and I think we have to go back to socially not outcasting, but socially disapprove, not even approving, just socially not wanting to be a part and just leaving that shit at home. Like I'm not be a fanhood. I'm not going to play into that. You know what I mean? And like I think people copy obviously what they perceive to be popular, and I think a lot of it comes from the internet. It could be from other medias or mediums, but I think a lot of it comes from the internet, and I think that's because it's always accessible and it allows you to take what you want instead of developing your own personality. I can just see what's popular instead of developing, myself. And I think that is a problem that we need to solve in terms of, and I don't really know how you do because it's not like you can restrict the access to the internet. It's not like you can restrict people's ability to use the internet, and nor should you. But I think, to a certain degree, we do have to inspire people to want to be, develop themselves, develop your own hobbies, develop your own passions, develop your own ideas again. Not just look on the internet and, modify what you want to do based off of what you see and you think is cool off of that. And I think that's kind of where a lot of what, not a lot, but a good amount of what we've come into and these problems that we've come into in terms of people not having their own personalities anymore. And a lot of places, I mean, not even just people, I'm going to talk about things outside of just people today. But I think that's where a lot of that comes from. It's just like the internet is used as kind of like a tool to develop instead of a reference, you know? And I think the reflection of this, especially with people, is that I think when people are just straight up copying other things, or in the instance that I'm talking about, they don't have an individual essence within themselves. I think it's because of the ease and convenience it is to just copy something else compared to them actually there it being like an issue. I think it's just ease and convenience. It's easier for me to do that than to stand on my own or to try to do stuff on my own. It's kind of scary to do that, or people might, like I said, question me, or I might have, I might not get the be the most popular person, or I might not have the same friends because they might think that what I'm doing is weird or what I'm doing isn't cool or something like that. And it's easier to just imitate, and it's easier to fall into these lines of just do whatever is in front of you, or just copy whatever is in front of you, or copy what you deem to be cool because it's quick, it's easy, convenient. And I think nothing worth having is easy in this world, really. So, being yourself is going to be hard at times, but it's worth it. And I think that's the thing that we have to get back to preaching to people, especially to the children, is that being yourself may be hard at times, but it's worth it. It's always worth it to be your own person. And, I think the biggest issue that you have with this is, I think it's the biggest issue, but one of the issues that we have just thinking beyond it or in the future sense is that kind of that lack of individualism is a slippery slope, because if you individuals that don't think for themselves or don't have their own personalities often don't think for themselves, and if you don't think for yourself, then it's often easier for you to be hurted, intellectually hurted, societally, So you go into these concepts of lack of expressive thought, oppression of ideas, anti-intellectualism. All that is easier to kind of accomplish when nobody is thinking for themselves, or nobody is, has the confidence to want to kind of be the person, not to stand out, because I don't think it's about standing out, but about just being comfortable in your own skin and comfortable in your own thoughts, and being and what you believe or what you do or what your hobbies are, whatever it is a true representation of you, and not a true representation or a representation of what you want you to be, or what you want someone to see you as, or what you think somebody will like you if you are, anything like that. And I think that's the biggest issue that we have, is that it can lead into that lack of oppression and thought, because oftentimes when you see these societies ran by dictators, the one thing that they love to do is try to control thought, speech, way people are thinking, what people wear, what people like, because it's easier to herd you that way. It's easier to put you in a box. It's easier to tell you what to do, tell you what to think, because you don't have anything that separates yourself. It makes you think, oh, I'm my own person. You know what I mean? And it just creates a boring, stagnant society that's lame, and no one wants to really be a part of that. No one wants to be a part of a gray blob of just everybody doing the same thing, looking the same, saying the same thing to each other every day. One of the best parts of life, especially when we were taught growing up, was that there was so much difference in the world. How people talked, what people ate, what people did, what people watched, where people went. All these things were representative of just like the differences in our society, the differences in our cultures, the differences in the world, and what we took, and what what we took from that was a representation of it. We represented what we were bringing to the table in that regard, and it was just such a it used to be a point of pride, not to be different, but a point of pride to be yourself. And it used to be representation of everything that you went through, your experiences, your memories, your passions, all of that stuff. And it's just sad because now it seems as if, it's the opposite, where you're celebrated for kind of sticking to the script more than anything else. But we really do have to get back to that, the concept of not wanting a boring kind of society where everybody's doing the same thing all the time, or trying to be the same things, or their ways of going about things are the same way, or even their ways of creativity is the same, like, and I think that's the biggest thing that we have to kind of combat in this element of kind of not having individualism anymore. And, like, we talk about, just to bring a few examples of this, we talk about hobbies and interests. Like, people, I think, do a lot of the same things now. And because they see people doing it online, or whatever the case may be, and they want to emulate that. We talk about, like, I do a podcast, and almost everybody and their mother has one. And a podcast is not a unique sort of hobby to have. It's not a bad one. I do it because I like to do it. I believe that's individual within me. But at the same time, I know a lot of people do it because they feel like everybody else is doing it, so I should be too. Same thing with streaming. Same thing with trying to be, an influencer or an Instagram model or something like that. It's like everybody's seeing stuff that they see on the internet people doing. It's like, oh, I should be able to do that too. That looks like, and not even that it looks cool or anything like that. It's just like, oh, that seems like something to do. Maybe I should do that to get my face out there. Maybe that's my, and I think looking at life and looking at hobbies and activities that way is a fast track to not enjoying the things that you do in your spare time. And that's a real fast track to depression and anger and all that sort of stuff. You have to really enjoy the things that you do. Like, I genuinely enjoy doing this. And I think that's one reason that keeps me wanting to do it. While at the same time, some people may not. And they may say, hey, they may be doing it just because they feel like it's the only way I can get views or something like that. And you don't want to spend your spare time. You only get a certain amount of spare time in this life. You don't want to spend it doing shit you don't want to do, or shit you feel like I'm doing for another reason other than, it benefiting or it bringing me joy, And especially with hobbies and interests being things that keep a lot of times keep people sane, it gives people keep people grounded, it gives them joy in life. You always want that to be something that reflects you and who you are. And if that's building gingerbread castles or houses or what's the things like the ships in a bottle or miniature um, sets, Legos or anything, like you should be able to embrace that and you should be proud of that because that's something that represents who you are and it's something that people can't like they can't take from you, you know. And I think, another concept, another example I wanted to bring in this was travel locations. I mean, I think this has become more evident over the past 10, 15 years or so, but a lot of locations, I hear people say this all the time, kind of look the same now, or they feel the same now because, and it's a business standpoint to it, right? Like if you kind of eliminate the anxiety of being somewhere new, then you increase the person's ability, the customer's ability to spend money, to openly to be more open in their transactions. And I think a lot of times, we hear places and they say, "Oh yeah, this is just like a New York, or this is just like a Miami, or this is just like this city, or this is just like that city," and instead of being its own, and a lot of times cities are taking, or not even just cities, locales are taking when they're adding in, homes or adding in strip malls or adding in, shopping places that are the same as other places have, is to kind of to compete in those markets, but they're also taking away from what makes those locales individual within themselves. And the purpose of traveling was always to see different places, to experience different things, to experience the uniqueness in the architecture or the people or the food or whatever the case may be. And if we lose that, then what is the point? And so I think, I think that the individual essence of a lot of locations outside of the general locale that they're in, like, like if you're on in Hawaii, the general concept that you're on an island, you can't beat. But a lot of places are losing that individualism in a concept of trying to create a general experience that they feel like people expect and people will be more used to spending money in. And businesses do the same thing. I use Sheets as an example, and for y'all that don't know what Sheets is, it's a like a gas station made to order food restaurant, similar, not similar. It's like a lower version of like a Wawa's or a Bucky's, and like they have the same format and look. A lot of businesses have the same format and look now. They don't have individual type of stores anymore. They don't have individual storefronts in terms of like their presentation because you want to be able to create a level of conformity in people's minds that they say like for any Sheets that you walk into, their layout is almost identical. If it isn't identical, it's because the literal format of the store made it to where like the ice cream machine that was here on the left always is on the right in this one store or something like that. But it never goes that far beyond that because they want you to be able to, as soon as you walk in, feel like I'm familiar with where I'm at. And while that's cool, you lose the concept of like generally what you thought about with places like what was it, the Carriage House, McDonald's, or Chick-fil-A in Georgia, or whatever it is that this individual, or you think about, I always hear people say, oh yeah, I was overseas, I was in California, or something like that, and I saw a 3-story McDonald's, or those sort of elements of businesses, or even just businesses that like the old Nickelodeon studios, how it had all the color and stuff to it, and it was individual because you could see that. And now just like a bland regular building, like all of that is going to the wayside in terms of just decreasing costs, increasing efficiency, and trying to increase the customers' familiarity with the store or familiarity with their environment. And while that has its positives, I should say, it also can be extremely limiting to the individualism that these places can provide and that experience of individualism that somebody might take with them. And so it's just another example of us sacrificing any sort of uniqueness for the concept of conformity. And another example I want to talk about here was sports. I think sports is a huge example of kind of what's of things that we have going wrong, not going wrong, but of people copying each other, and not in the concept of the teams or anything like that. But like I use basketball because I think basketball is a great example. In watching kids play basketball now, they all play basketball the same because they all go to the same trainers who teach them the same moves and the same concepts. And there's no, but basketball, like most sports that you play, when you play it different ways. It's a reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of what you went through. A reflection of where you're from. It's a reflection of what you've learned. Like everybody's style of play is different. Like the way that James Harden plays basketball is different than the way that Dwayne Wade played basketball. That was different than the way that Michael Jordan played basketball, which is different than the way that Dominique Wilkins played basketball, or the way that Charles Barkley played basketball, different than the way that Kevin Garnett played basketball, different than the way that Tim Duncan played basketball, different than the way that LaMarcus Aldridge played basketball, different from the way that Blake Griffin played basketball. But we come especially into like the college and the youth level ranks now where everybody plays the exact same style. Everybody's either an on-ball guard or like a tweening 3-4 that type of, and I'm sorry for using terms that some people may not know, a forwardish guardish type, a forward that dribbles, and everybody has the same move or the same moves, or if you have a quote unquote a bag, the bag has the same moves in it that you copied from somebody else. And it used to see people, especially back in the younger, when I was younger, like styles made matchups, and like you could watch Gary Payton and you could watch Jason Williams and you could watch two great basketball players that were completely different from each other. And the styles is what made that interesting. The styles is what made you a fan of them. The same with football. Cam Newton was a huge personality in the football world when he was playing because his style of play was unique, his personality was unique, and it was genuine to him. Same with Michael Vick, the same with Barry Sanders, the same with Julio Jones, the same with James Harrison, the same with Troy Polamalu. Like we used to, like some of the people that we remember so heavily were guys that played in their own way. They had their own individual essence, and that's what we remembered about them. But we kind of get into these concepts of everybody being the same, doing the same things, feeling like they have to play the same way to learn the specific skills in order to be successful, and not bringing their own creativity into it, because that's really what it is in sports. It's just a lack of creativity. Everybody just cookie cutter goes by what they're taught, but no one tries to be creative no more. Jamal Crawford had several moves that were individual just to him, and people may try to do them, but you knew that's a Jamal Crawford move. And people don't try to do that anymore. Everything is just kind of, you got to move. Like everybody has the James Harden step back now. Everybody does that, and so that is just, like I said, overtraining, lack of creativity, and pressure to succeed, I think kind of creates that. But that's the issue. You have it in sports. You have it in fashion. I think fashion is a little bit different because at its essence, it's about making people want to follow that. But I think now you have, even fashion has less of a uniqueness to it, to where a lot of brands look the same, or a lot of brands are playing off of other brands, or instead of trying to make a new unique look, they just simplify something they already have. And I mean, you see a lot of kind of lack of creativity, because lack of individualism is a lack of creativity. And I think that is reflective in a lot of fashion now. I know a lot, males wise, there's only but so many different versions of what's the words I'm looking for, the jogger sweatpants, and like some Crocs or some KDs or something like that. There's only so many different versions of that you can wear. Um, and I think when the other half of it is that when something comes out that people view as individual or cool, everybody hops on it because everybody's like, oh shit, it's something new. And is it something you like or is it just something new? Or maybe you like it because it's new. Who knows? But that I think fashion wise, that's kind of the issue that we're at now. I think TV shows, media, media is also another issue with this, and like I want to talk about the show Baddies for a second because I watch it with my wife at times. I think the last Baddies I watched might have been Baddies Africa or something like that, and I think it fits in very well in this particular concept because I know like what drew people to Baddies originally, other than if you watch like Bad Girls Club or something like that, was that you had these girls that were different personalities, different people, and that's what made you fans of them. Same with like Jocelyn Cabaret or any of these other shows, Love and Hip Hops or any of those things. They were fans, not fans, sorry. They were different people, and you became fans of people based upon who you uniquely liked, what they represented that you liked. It may have been the way they talked, the way they looked, something cool they said, whatever the case may be, but you were fans of them. I'm sorry, based on that. Now, I've kind of grown out. I mean, I kind of lost interest in it because I felt like the last season that I watched, a lot of the girls were similar to each other in terms of how they spoke, in terms of like down to their names. Everybody got like two names. Something Alexis or something Fire, something Doll, something Cat. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's because they saw somebody else that's famous already with that name, and they just playing off of that. Um, they all have the same looks, the same eyebrows, the same hairstyles, the same makeup style, the same clothes on, and it just gets to a point to where it's like, what makes you different? What like, and they all saying like, oh, she's not me, she can't do what I do, but like, what do you do that's different? I don't see it. You know what I mean? And so I think that's just to kind of bring that as an example of just something that where you have kind of a lack of creativity within those that kind of shows where everybody's acting the same, doing the same thing. They might be, even when they arguing and fighting, they're saying the same things to each other. Like there's no individualism within that, and it makes it boring to watch. Um, Film and media wise, I think, and Baddies is part of this as well. A majority of everything now is just reboots or sequels or continuations, and I think and that's for a reason. Like I remember watching them as Vince Vaughn. Why they don't make, like the stupid um, comedy movies that they used to make all the time anymore. And he said that studios went away from wanting to have them because they wanted stuff with established IPs. Because an IP meant that there was already familiarity with that, with whatever it was. There's a established lore behind it that you can choose easily. You don't have to worry about trying to create a story. You can just choose one. And if it's characters to pull from, sequels, merchandising, all that was easier because you already had established IPs to do it. And yeah, that's cool, but like everything doesn't need to be based on something. Because originally all these things that we're basing everything on at some point wasn't an original thought. It may have been based upon an earlier book or earlier movie or something, but everything came from a concept of somebody had to do something original to it. And it's this, but the preference of going away from original creations, I think, just is another example of people having a lack of creativity and a desire for ease and convenience um, over originality and over creativity, over individualism. And the only way to break that is to stop accepting it. I think, in media, I think it's easy because the market dictates it, right? Like you saw Sinners was an original film, an original screenplay, and it did great. And you'll probably see more. I mean, and you would hope to see more people try to do individual movies because of that, or individual mainstream because like yeah, your independent theaters are always doing it, but unless people turn down wanting to see movies that are just literally going off of, hey, we're a rerun, or hey, we're a reboot, like the new Anaconda movie. It looks funny. Sadly enough, I might go watch it, but it is strictly just something playing off the fact that there's an existing IP for something, and it's been a long enough time since there's been a reboot or there's been a sequel, so let's make that. They did a little bit of a creative way of going about it in terms that this movie is about them making a reboot, and the reboot goes wrong, so it's a reboot of a movie about a reboot of a movie, but still, you know what I mean? But at least I can appreciate that originality compared to like the 97th Marvel movie in France. I think that's why Marvel has kind of fell out of being a top thing now, because people just got tired of the consistent droning on it. Um, and I think, music also to kind of round out. Well, I'm not rounding out media. Actually, I got a few more things to talk about in media, but music is also an issue in terms of. I hate to sound like the boomer or the old person, and be like, "Oh, music in our day was better." I don't know if it's better, but I do know that a lot of artists now version of sampling. Because there's nothing wrong with sampling. Everybody samples music, but there's a lot more songs which are not, in my opinion, samples, but they're just remakes of the original song, where you used almost the entire beat, or you used their entire hook, or you used the lyrics that were popular from the original song to pretty much sell that song, or and you changed a few things, but that's not really new music. That's literally kind of, in my opinion, a lack of creativity in terms of not being able to create your own ideas, or using something instead of being able to create your own ideas. And I think that we have. Another thing where it goes back to, if us as consumers turn it down or turn it away, then the market will change what is dictating to want, because there is, it just isn't there anymore, or that desire or that want isn't there anymore. Um, and even with video games, right? I think video games are similar to sports in the concept that everybody plays the same games. They play the same, even when they play the same game, they're playing with the same people. They're playing with the same teams. They're playing with the same guns or loadouts or whatever the case may be. They're playing the same game modes, or they use the same strategies that they see online. Nobody is trying to, use people that they like. They only use people that they feel like are the best players, or you don't try to learn the game or learn different strategies or learn with different teams or people. You just want to like do that because you don't want to lose online, so you just strictly just keep doing the same thing all the time, and it makes a lot of the gaming. I talked about this last season with the gaming episode we did. It makes a lot of the gaming world stagnant and not fun as well, because nobody is doing their own thing anymore. Um, and so I think that's also an issue. Um, and then AI. AI is the thing about AI is AI on its own can't create an original thought, right? Like it can't. Like, and what I mean when I say that is AI on its own can only regurgitate what is seen or what it believes to have seen. And it can create something based off of imitating or mimicking something else. I can ask AI right now to create me a picture of Bugs Bunny high fiving Mario on a boat in Italy, and it'll do it. But it's going to do it based upon what it's seen other artists paint Bugs Bunny, what it's seen other artists paint Mario, Italy, and it's going to take all these different established ideas and try to form them into one. That's not particularly creativity, and I think the problem with AI is not that it's bad, but when we use AI to create so heavily for us in terms of music, in terms of art, in terms of literature, in terms of academia, in terms of just everything that we use, then we're immediately succumbing to the concept of not having individual thought or not having creativity anymore because we're literally relying on a source that is not creative. You know what I mean? And it's just sad to see. Um, and some of the concerns that I have regarding this, other than AI just not being creative, I mean, AI being a source that is not creative within itself, is that, but the general concerns I have in terms of this individualism thing is, I think the first thing and why that's the case is that there's a big fear of being yourself. There's a fear of failure. There's and not only is there a fear, there's a reason to be fearful, right? The internet has led to increased ridicule, lack of support, and things of that nature, where people may express themselves, may express their hobbies, their passions, whatever is individual to them, and they may be ridiculed for it severely. And that is something that will make somebody not want to put themselves out there, or want to just say, "Hey, look, whatever y'all doing, I'll just do that." And I think we have to get away from that. Um, I think that we have to both be fearless and be confident in who we are, regardless of what somebody else says, and then on top of that, not care about the ridicule, not care about, and then on top of that, as people, not shit on everything that people do. Sometimes the best form of support that you can provide somebody is just not shitting on what they're doing, you know? Um, and so I think that in in its own sense would help people express their individualism and their creativity more, as if they felt either support or just they wouldn't be ridiculed severely for it. Um, and I think the other part of this is that imitation is not only promoted, but it's rewarded. And I think that's one of the problems that we see is, yeah, that's one of the problems that we see is that it's not promoted, it's just rewarded. It's sorry, imitation is not only promoted, it's rewarded over being creative, in terms of what we were just talking about, in terms of music, in terms of media, in terms of film, in terms of TV, in terms of fashion, in terms of all these things. Just being able to present something that people like is definitely a lot more than that. Um, and I think, the only way that we can reverse this, I keep saying, is that the market has to match the market dictates the desire. And if we dictate that we want, you know, creativity and individualism, then it creates the incentive to have it. But as long as, we're fine with promoting everything being, copies of each other, everything being lack of individualism with lack of any sort of creativity, everything being a remake of each other or a rework of something else, then that's all we're going to get, because there's no incentive to do anything different. And I think the other thing is that when we talk about the incentive, is that people also accept and praise these examples of lack of the lack of creativity examples, which again, it further going to incentivize that, right? Like Marvel for a long time had no reason to try to do anything different to its formula, because everybody was just going to go eat that. Um, Everybody was going to just eat that up, and I think that was kind of, everybody was going to eat up kind of what they were talking about, what they were doing, regardless of how uniform the movie was to another one, or how little it actually, like, the plot actually moved anything forward outside of just moving you to another movie or anything like that. And I think, but if everybody's going to come watch it, then that's the case. Like, to bring it back to a video game standpoint, Call of Duty is forever going to keep making you the same game every year and getting worse at it, because their sales go up every year until people stop praising them for it and stop buying it. Of course, they're not going to do anything different. Not, because what would be the benefit of them not doing it? Um, the internet And just to bring it back, the internet, as we talked about before, is much of a threat to individualism as it is a tool, and it is a tool. Like people can research things, see things, learn things that they would otherwise not have the ability to do. But also with that, it's a double-edged sword, right? And it's not, and again, back to what I was saying earlier when we were talking about like the internet type of point of this, it's not like something that you can control or something that even needs to be controlled, but it's something that people need to be cognizant of is that, hey, this is like, don't lose yourself in it. You know what I mean? Or don't lose yourself trying to copy other things that you see on the internet. And it's wild that, that's still a point because we hear that all the time in TV shows and music and all this stuff about don't, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. But it's crazy that we still have to keep saying it. And, to come back to the AI point just for a second, an over reliance on it is ruining creative thought process because people just would rather, it's easier just to be like, oh, what did AI say? And with that, it's always going to, that AI type of process and making individual thought less necessary always is going to promote anti-intellectualism because if you don't have to use your brain, that's anti-intellectualism. And so we have to always be cognizant of our reliance on AI and using it because it's a great tool to have. I'm not trying to downplay it in that regard, but not making it a issue beyond comparison. I mean, not making an issue beyond comparison, not making a tool that is used beyond everything else, beyond any comparison to anything else, I should say. And if we do that, if we're able to kind of not overly just submit our lives to it, then we can still be able to use that and be able to think for ourselves as well and be able to create for ourselves as well. But if we just kind of turn off our brains completely to just say, hey, let AI handle it, we're always going to be in an issue of this or a threat of this anti-intellectualism, which, as I was saying, I think I forget the episode I was talking about, it makes it easier to control you, easier to herd you mentally. I think part of the problem with the lack of individualism, or one of the results of that is everybody is so quickly to want to classify themselves and each other now, whether that's based on your race, your gender, your sexual preference, your religion, your age, your hobbies, or whatever the case may be. Everybody wants to classify themselves because it's so easy to be like, I'm this, I'm this. It gives you almost a personality. You know what I'm saying? I'm this instead of I'm myself. And like, I'm a black male. Being black or being a male is not the only parts of my personality. Uh, I'm a Q. Being a Q is not the only part of my personality. I'm a husband. Being a husband is not the only part of my personality. Um, like, I think there has to be more to it than, just than us just categorizing ourselves off of one thing. And if we continue down this road of not thinking for ourselves, it becomes easier to do that. And so to conclude, I think the differences between us are what spawn kind of that creativity and uniqueness of society. And we can't lose that. We literally cannot lose that because that is what builds us. That's what we remember about each other. That is what we think about each other. That's what we see and is what we value. Not just in each other, but the world around us. We see beauty in that. That inspires us. And if we lose that, I think we lose a lot of that inspiration and that spark of the world. And people are concerned with acting in how they see as cool or successful rather than what suits them or their interests. And that's nothing new. Like that's been going on since the dawn of time. But I think it's more now because I think more people are seeing success come for others easily, and they want it too, and they're willing to sacrifice that to get it. Where I think back, I call it like the instant celebrity. Like it's so easy to be a celebrity now. Well, back, I think they used to say you used to have talent to be famous. And I think that was kind of where, that line kind of drew. While now it's just you can do anything and be viral, be famous for 15 minutes to however long you want to be, And so where do we, and there's different levels. Everybody's a celebrity to somebody nowadays. So, like, and so what is it that, I mean, I think we have to not combat it, but we have to try to always identify that, hey, it's not just about being cool or popular or what's selling right now or what people want right now. It's about what you want to do and about what type of person you are and what do you represent within yourself. And you have to be comfortable within yourself. And that may be doing some of these similar things, but as long as it's within yourself and you truly are with that, then that's great. But if you're not, then there's no reason for it. You know what I mean? And it's more than just being different. When we stop thinking for ourselves, we're easy to control, we're easy to manipulate. That's what I was saying earlier about the anti-intellectualism. Like, we can't, it's bigger than just being an individual for the sake of being an individual. But create individual thought means that you can't be hurted. And I'm not like one of the people to be like, oh, I'm an independent thinker and I'm a question. No, like, I mean, some things, yeah. Like, I don't know as much about medicine. So if I hear a doctor tell me something, I'm going to listen to the doctor, yes. But independent thought and creative thought is what drives us to be analytical. It what drives us to ask questions. It's what drives us to pontificate, to theorize, to think, and like without that, we just become pretty much slots to be, to for people to play with and to do what they want with, and we lose what brings us ourselves. And I think when, just to wrap it up, when everyone is copying each other, things are lame. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And so, what I would leave y'all with is that if you didn't take anything from this episode, I would say just to dare to be different, or better yet, dare to be yourself. That is some of the best advice I think anybody could ever have. It's just to dare to be yourself. So I appreciate y'all for tuning in to this week's episode. Again, I'm your podcast host, Robert Davis. This is the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. Follow me again on Instagram, RTD_III, Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Don't know why I forgot my own name there. Like I said, follow, comment, like, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. We are, and I'm gratefully appreciative of all of your support, your continued support, and everything that you all show me week to week, season to season with this. And so, we'll keep it trucking. All right, I appreciate y'all for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Peace.